name's Andy. You are listening to the Fishhawk Murders. This is the true story of murders that happened in my small town when I was a boy. On episode 1, we learned about the murders of the 5 Johnson family members, and we followed a local man, Sonny Minos, as he pursued 2 possible suspects. Back to the day of the murders when Sonny meets up with his friend Jordan at the Fishhawk ballpark as scheduled at 4 p.m. Sonny tells Jordan every detail of what happened earlier that day. Sonny tells how he took the money and even where he hid it. Jordan advises Sonny to go to the police to let them know about the couple, and Sonny agrees. Before they go to the police, Sonny and Jordan decide to go to a local bar to grab a bite to eat. In the bar, everyone is already talking about the murders. Sonny and Jordan sit in a corner booth and keep to themselves. They eat and have a couple of beers. Sonny tells Jordan he has recently gotten a passport for a cruise he was going on with his mom. He jokingly talks about heading to Mexico with the money and leaving the phosphate mine and the town behind for good. He says he could just disappear. Sonny is also worried that the money he took might belong to drug cartels, and they are likely going to come looking for him. He is worried the man in the SUV might have seen his truck following them, or seen him pulling out of the Flying J station after he took the bags. For good reason, Sonny's paranoia is growing. A couple beers turn into a few too many, and Sonny keeps going on about running away with the money. He also knows he needs to tell the police what he knows about the couple. Since the 2 men have gotten quite drunk, they make a plan for Jordan to pick Sonny up in the morning, and they both will go to the police. The next morning at 8 a.m., Jordan picks up Sonny. They head to McDonald's to grab breakfast on the way to the police station. At the intersection on Fishhawk Boulevard, Sonny spots the man from the SUV outside a gas station next to McDonald's. He sees the man pumping gas into a blue Toyota sedan. Sonny stays low and writes down the license plate and snaps pictures with his phone. The woman from the SUV is talking to some locals outside of the gas station. Sonny tells Jordan he thinks the couple is probably looking for him. Sonny is really scared and remembers his pickup truck is parked in front of his mom's house. Sonny insists Jordan turn away from the gas station and drive him back to his mom's so he can move the truck. They speed back to Sonny's mom's house. Sonny jumps out of the car and tells Jordan he is going to figure out what to do and call him later. Sonny jumps in his truck and speeds off toward the back roads heading out of town. He heads back to the phosphate mine and collects the bags full of money. Afterwards, he calls Jordan and he tells him he is afraid the cartel is going to find him and probably kill him. He decides right there that he is going to take the money and go on the run. He says he will probably head for Mexico and then catch a flight from there to somewhere safe. He tells Jordan to wait a couple of hours to give him a head start before going to tell the police everything. Sonny texts Jordan all of the pictures he took and the license plate numbers for both vehicles he witnessed the couple driving. About an hour later, the FBI gets their first break in the case when Jordan calls 911 to report possibly having knowledge about the murders. He meets with the FBI and tells them Sonny's whole story and gives them the car's license plate numbers and the pictures Sonny took of the couple by the river and at the gas station. The car was rented to a woman named Liliana Beltran. It did not take law enforcement long to track down the Toyota. The couple was still driving around the small town of Fishhawk. Liliana Beltran and Gabriel Morales are detained and questioned in connection to the Johnson family murders. Both suspects have long police records and are known associates of gang and drug organizations. When asked what they were doing in Fishhawk, Florida, neither of them provided a credible reason to be there. When the FBI interrogators explained a witness saw a black SUV leaving the murder crime scene and confronted the two with the pictures Sonny took with his cell phone, both suspects shut down and request lawyers. A week later, the abandoned SUV is found under a bridge. The license plate matches what Sonny provided, but the interior had been completely wiped clean. The SUV had been reported stolen from a home in Norfolk, Virginia a week earlier. Based on the information provided by Jordan and Sonny's pictures, the FBI estimated about where the couple must have pulled off near the Alafai River. They send divers down into the river and recover a gun. The evidence is piling up against the 2 suspects in custody. It is obvious to everyone that the 2 suspects are connected to the Johnson family murders, but there are still huge holes in the case. Neither suspect is cooperating with the investigation, and both are being held in a Hillsborough County jail without bail. The case makes absolutely no sense, and there are few physical clues available. There is no evidence that the Johnson family had any affiliation to any drug dealers. There were no unusual purchases, no unusual bank account activity. Their neighbors never saw any unusual visitors or traffic at the Johnson home. They were usually only visited by local family and friends. The FBI cannot connect either suspect to the murders in the home at all. No tire tracks on the property, no DNA, no fingerprints, no evidence at all that either suspect had ever been inside the Johnson home. When questioned about the murders in the house, Liliana and Gabriel strongly deny knowing anything about a murdered family. A park ranger who was working the entrance to Lithia Springs Park remembered the black SUV entering and leaving the park that morning. Unfortunately, the park does not have any security cameras set up. He says nothing seemed unusual about the SUV in either direction. The SUV had driven around the small park and stopped near the swimming area. The vehicle was in the park for about 30 minutes before leaving. Based on the information provided by Sonny and Jordan's story, the FBI concluded that there was most likely a drug and money exchange at that park. But there was no information about anyone else who entered the park that morning. Unfortunately, the FBI has had no luck locating Sonny. Locating him is crucial because he is the only eyewitness connecting the suspects to the SUV and the gun and placing them in the vicinity of the crime on that morning. They send out an all-points bulletin for him and his truck. His picture is sent to all of the Mexican border checkpoints, but he has not been located. With the two suspects remaining silent and the huge holes in the case, the investigation is growing cold. 2 weeks pass with no way to connect the suspects in custody to the murders in the house. The suspects won't agree to give statements but maintain their innocence and their ignorance of an entire family being murdered. The suspect's lawyer informs the FBI that the suspects will enter a not guilty plea and that they are preparing for a long legal battle. The FBI is desperate for any leads. They can connect the two suspects to the scene where Justin was found dead. They have pictures of the two with the SUV and can tie them to the gun pulled from the Alafai River. They can prove that the gun found in the river fired the bullet that killed Justin. There is enough evidence to show the couple is likely responsible for Justin's death, but law enforcement needs a lot more evidence to start connecting the dots to explain what happened to the rest of the Johnson family on that day. When the suspects realize the evidence is piling up against them, they task their lawyer with exploring the possibility of a deal in exchange for their cooperation. They are willing to talk about what happened that morning, but they maintain their innocence. They claim they acted in self-defense. Investigators do not know what to believe. Ultimately, law enforcement has to consider the likelihood of the suspect's story. I spoke with FBI agent Brendan Hunter, who was assigned to work the investigation. He said the idea that the suspect spent an entire night brutally murdering a family, leaving no evidence behind, and then took part in a drug deal at a park up the street from the murder, and then murdered the last remaining family member in the street after pulling away from the park, took a suspension of disbelief most of us were not capable of. He says it is common knowledge among law enforcement agencies that drug dealers do not purposely draw extra attention to their interactions, especially when a significant amount of money is being exchanged. There is growing pressure from the media and the community for answers. The town is terrified and shut down with fear. The investigators must do something to get answers. If the couple in custody did not kill the Johnson family, the murderer is slipping farther and farther away from capture. Florida state prosecutors arrange a meeting with the suspect's lawyer to discuss a way to get more information from the couple. The investigation is slowed to a stop, and investigators desperately need a new lead to follow to solve this murder case. Prosecutors are willing to disregard any charges related to drugs or the stolen SUV in exchange for information of the details of that morning and their interaction with Justin Johnson. The incarcerated couple agrees to the exchange. According to both suspects, who are questioned separately and who have not spoken to each other in weeks, each identified Justin as the aggressor. Their stories were identical. Gabriel drove the SUV out of the park that morning. The couple had a disagreement about how to get back to the highway and pulled off the road unknowingly in front of the Johnson family's home to look at a map. Once they got it figured out, they pulled back onto the road and continued on. They saw the green truck speeding up the road toward them. The man pulled the green truck out in front of them to stop them on the road that morning. He started yelling at them and accusing them of hurting his family. They had no idea what the crazy guy was talking about. They thought he must have been on drugs. After yelling back and forth a couple of times, things got out of control fast. Justin pulled out a gun and aimed it at the couple. Gabriel acknowledges he also had a gun and pulled it out, but only in self-defense. Gabriel says the kid was yelling hysterically and accusing them of all sorts of shit. The kid pulled out the gun and pointed it right at me. Only then did I pull out my gun and fire. The couple was in shock and disbelief after the altercation. Liliana wondered if the man somehow knew they had just done a drug deal, and if he was some kind of redneck vigilante. Because of the money in the back and the stolen car, the couple fled. Law enforcement does not automatically believe the justifiable self-defense story. Both suspects agreed to conduct polygraph tests if they are only asked questions related to the details of the shooting and about their knowledge of the murders in the house, if any. The test results show that neither suspect had any prior knowledge of the Johnson family before Justin stopped their vehicle. They knew nothing of the Johnson house or of their murders. Even though polygraph tests are only 87% dependable, the state considers the results reliable. This new information further perplexes law enforcement. They have to consider that the justifiable self-defense story could be possible after all. The couple's story seems practical at least. The couple had just come from a drug deal. The vehicle was stolen, and they had duffel bags full of cash in the back. The couple had to leave the scene and dump the gun and the SUV. They could not stay and claim self-defense. So, could Justin have been the aggressor? The FBI had to find out. Phone records show that Justin received several unanswered calls from his sister Ellie's cell phone in the early hours of the morning on the night of the murders. Justin's baseball team had just scored a victory against their in-state rival, the Jacksonville Generals. According to his roommates, that night Justin had been celebrating the win with his teammates, and after a night of drinking had passed out about 12:30 a.m. The missed calls from Ellie's phone started around 2 o'clock in the morning. There was also one text that went through. It went unanswered as well. This was the message. A stranger is in the house, hurting Dad. Come home, please hurry. His roommates were asleep when Justin left his apartment that morning. Justin woke up, saw the missed calls and the text, and jumped into his green truck and sped home. He tried calling his mom, dad, and sister's cell phones. We don't know what Justin's mental state was on that morning. He may have still been drunk or hungover. We don't know if he was thinking clearly. All we know is that he knew his family was in trouble and he was going to get home and help them. Based on Lily and Gabriel's statements, his mood was hysterical and irrational. As Justin drove down the street to his family's home, he saw an unknown vehicle with unknown occupants driving away from his family's home. He stopped them to find out if they were the ones hurting his family. The couple, likely coming from a drug deal, were also likely on edge and paranoid. Justin pulled a gun, rapidly escalating the situation, and unfortunately, shots were fired and Justin was killed. There is no rhyme or reason to the way Justin died that morning. We can't be sure what twist of fate caused Gabriel and Lily to meet Justin on that road that morning. Like I said at the beginning of this story, the circumstances of this case are inexplicable. There is no silver lining for the Johnson family. What happened to them is unimaginable. But at least we know Justin never made it home to see the rest of his family tortured and brutally murdered. At this point in our story, law enforcement is starting to believe that Justin and his family's murder were unrelated. The FBI still has no idea what happened inside the Johnsons' home. They still have no leads. If anyone in town knew anything, they had not come forward. The first part of any murder investigation is the gathering of evidence, documenting the facts. You do not try and solve any case on the first day. You don't make any assumptions. You collect all of the evidence, just the facts. You disregard opinion and speculation. Once all possible facts are gathered, then you start to piece together or eliminate the possibilities. In this case, the forensics team took several weeks collecting evidence from the house and from the street crime scenes. An unnamed policeman in a local newspaper interview stated, "It did not look like a robbery because nothing appeared to be missing." I am going to use actual case files to describe the scene inside the Johnson home. There were 4 dead bodies in the house. The 2 adults, Amanda and Chuck Johnson, were tortured and their bodies mutilated. They were murdered last, after the children. The children were tied to their beds. They were stripped of their pajamas and had their throats slit. The adults were separated, one upstairs and one downstairs. Mr. Johnson's body was found in the couple's bedroom upstairs. He had several fingers and toes removed. They were removed with something like gardening shears. His entire headless body was bruised from being beat with a wooden baseball bat that was found in the home. He had numerous broken and crushed bones and ribs from the pre-death beating. He was beheaded and his burnt head was found on a shelf at the top of the stairs. Miss Johnson's body was mutilated and beaten like her husband's. Unlike her husband, the torture she endured seemed to focus on her reproductive organs. She was killed last. Miss Johnson was forced to listen to her family being murdered before her own death. Her burnt head was on the mantel above the fireplace. After the killer finished torturing and killing all of the family members, the killer put the heads onto a propane grill that was on the screened-in back porch of the house. The killer lit the grill and doused the heads with lighter fluid to ensure the heads were scorched unrecognizable. Then they put them back in the house. Blood from all 4 bodies was collected and smeared on all of the main walls, furniture, and counters. Bloody, headless bodies were dragged up and down hallways and stairs to ensure the home would be covered in blood. It was obvious that the killer wanted to create the most grotesque scene possible for whoever found the bodies. A message was written in blood on a mirror hung behind Amanda Johnson's body that read, "I'm the doctor." The FBI agents assigned to the investigation had never seen such a gory murder scene. Nobody could fathom what motive would possibly cause anyone to do something so horrible. The only thing they knew for sure was that the killer was a demented psychopath. When the details of the murder leaked to the locals in town, they were shocked and petrified. Fishhawk, once a place where nobody ever locked their doors, was now a town where everyone was guarded and suspicious. Families stayed home. Local bars and restaurants had no patrons. Parents dropped off and picked up their kids from school. Parks were empty. The entire town was shut down by fear. Everyone had their own ideas about who might have done it. There were rumors running rampant about everyone all over town. It was like the people in Fishhawk lost all faith in humanity. We were certain someone in town knew what happened. Perhaps it was one of our neighbors. The fear of having a killer among us grew strong. All trust between neighbors evaporated. Law enforcement looked really hard at the medical staff where Amanda worked in the hope that the "I'm the doctor" message left on the living room mirror was a confession of sorts. There was one man, a doctor named David Simmons, who the FBI took a hard look at. Dr. Dave, the name he preferred, was 47, recently divorced, and often made unfitting comments related to his availability to the women he worked with. There were reports that he had made aggressive advances toward Amanda Johnson. Amanda was a beautiful woman and was no stranger to men's attention. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that Amanda and Chuck were happily married, and any attention from other men would not be taken seriously. After a couple of interrogations, Dr. Davis fleshed out to be a sometimes annoying but harmless flirt. He and everyone else working at the hospital were cleared as suspects, leaving law enforcement literally clueless and without leads. I interviewed Patricia Woodworth, who was the eyewitness on the day of Justin's murder. I asked her about what the town felt like after the murders. She said, "This area has never been the same since. Anybody who was here at the time of those murders has been emotionally affected for life. We will never think about the town the same. It's like a gloom has hung over the town ever since. For a long time, the whole town was quiet, like everyone was in mourning. I guess we felt like having fun was not allowed. Maybe it would be disrespectful to anyone who knew the family. The Johnsons were a very popular and well-liked family. The murders changed this town forever. I honestly believe the whole town has PTSD now. There are a lot of new people moving into this town, and they are breathing a new life into the town. But the longtime locals will never forget, and we will never be the same." Thank you for listening. On the next episode, the killer strikes again, and we finally meet the demented psychopath. If you like this content, please follow, share, review, or tell a friend about it.